Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
The holidays are supposed to be a time of joy, but that may not be what you're experiencing if you're missing someone who's passed away.
Our guest on this episode is grief crisis consultant Harold Ivan Smith, who's written many books on grief, including A Decembered Grief, Living with Loss While Others Are Celebrating. Harold, thank you so much for joining us and trying to help our listeners get through what may be a tough holiday season for them.
Sure. And, for some people, it's almost like an anticipatory grief. There's been a diagnosis. There's been the remission has ended. So it's just like, will they be alive to Christmas or New Year's? But for others, it's a sense of that surprise. And I have often said in a split second, your ho, ho, ho can become an oh, oh, oh that quickly. And I experienced that working in the funeral profession. It's just suddenly those things change without our permission.
And tell us about how you came to be a grief specialist.
Really, when my grandfather died on Christmas Eve, when I was 11 years old. And, in those days, in rural Indiana where he lived, everything closed up. So there was nothing open. I just remember it was my mother's father, and she was just so overwhelmed by the loss. And, it's odd. All I can remember of the funeral home is that it's dark in my memory. I can remember a lot of details, but you're 10 years old, 11 years old, and you're sitting there and your presents are home, and we didn't open presents that year. It was just like when you go back to school in January, well, how was your Christmas? My grandfather died.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a critical moment because what happened in that little rural town, my grandfather, for whom I'm named, best friend owned the funeral home. And yes, we were sad with my grandfather, who was 80, dying. But that Christmas Day, 3 young boys who had graduated from the high school in the spring and joined the military came home from boot camp, and one of their parents gave them a new Chevy. And they left the road at over 100 miles an hour, and those 3 young men were killed instantly. And suddenly I learned, yes, our grief was horrendous. A person's grandfather should not die on Christmas Eve, but neither should 3 recent high school graduates either. And that whole community was just sucked into this deep, deep pain. And I learned that there are some gradations in grief that happen during the holidays, where it's anticipated or it's totally unanticipated. It makes it very difficult.
What advice do you have for people who are dealing with a new loss this holiday season, or if they have a loved one who is very ill and they know it's going to be their last Christmas or Hanukkah being around?
Yes. Well, I tell them to be very aware that in the first case, it can't be Christmas or Hanukkah as usual. There are individuals who believe we've got to go straight forward, buck up, suck up, we're going to do this. And I tell them, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. With the hospice patients, and I've worked a lot, and I'm getting ready to speak to hospices next week in South Carolina, I always remind them, yes, it may well look like it's their last Christmas, but it may not be. So to say, what can we do to make this Christmas good, this Hanukkah good, this New Year's good? And part of it is about making decisions. Yes, the holiday cannot be like it was, but it can be like it is going to be. And I tell some people, it may be the year to totally do something different. For example, if you've had a big family, loud family gathering on Christmas Eve, kind of the potluck, this might be the year to go out for a nice, quiet, early soup and salad dinner. If you've gone for a big meal in a restaurant, this might be the year to have a buffet at home. So it's not like you're going to change the holidays forever. It's saying this year we need to make a good decision. For some people, it's complicated by the presence of young children. I spent Thanksgiving with 3 under 4 years of age, and wow, was that a learning curve. But yet I also learned that those children are very perceptive. We assume, children they're too young to understand. I go, no, they're not. They are very much aware. They may not understand what's happening, but they realize my mom is crying a lot, my dad is sad, and they're trying to figure that out to the extent of their knowledge. And so it can be very different. And there's always someone who, wants to make it, we're going to do this. It also becomes tragic when someone is trying to get through their grief by alcohol, by anesthetizing their pain. And I tell them that's always a bad decision. I'm not making a decision about drinking. I'm just saying, whatever you do that distracts you from your grief, Bill Warden, the great therapist, says it's going to complicate it. And I'll often tell people, now, the decisions you make in December will have January consequences. So I've seen some people that, say the death happens in November, they're going to have this spectacular Christmas, just go out, and especially if they go, we'll make it up to the kid. And I go, that's not always a wise idea. Why do you want to do that? And maybe it's much easier to have a very mild holiday. But also, I remind people the holiday is about remembering. It is about not forgetting the individual that died. There are families and groups and partners and friends that go, whatever you do, don't say the name. Don't say the name. That'll upset everyone. Uh-huh. And I think it's not saying the name that becomes so very, and for some to go, well, if they forgot Dad, they'll forget me when I go.
Yeah.
And it's about saying, we're sad. I suggest things like, okay, before we have dessert on the holiday, we're going to go around and everybody tell a favorite memory of the deceased. And, sometimes they're sad, but sometimes you get to laughing, or someone says, no, wait a minute. I was there and it did not quite happen that way. And so and there's that presence. I also urge people, if there's a tree, and I urge people do some kind of decoration. Because if you go no decorations, everywhere you look in your home or your condo or your apartment, you're going to be reminded, last year there was a tree there, last year there was a wreath, all those kind of dimensions. So you don't have to decorate all out. One widow I worked with came to a wonderful conclusion. She put up a tree and strung white lights on it, but no ornament. And the absence of ornament said, this year is different. Uh-huh. Next year, we'll go back to what we've done in previous years, but this year. Now, what can be complicated, too, is if the deceased was a person that dearly loved Christmas, or loved Hanukkah, or loved New Year's, they were just in the height of glory, whether it was cooking, baking, buying, wrapping. That's the way it was with my sister, her death. I think it hit me much harder. She's older. Because she was the one that wanted everyone to have a gift to open. Everybody had to have a gift to open. And she thought there ought to be all this food. And boy, how do you sort that out to go, she's gone. And what do we do? And unfortunately, in my family, we have not been together as a family since my father's death. My father was the glue that held everything together. And after he died, everybody kind of did their own thing. And I can't be, there's always this person, you want to be the Christmas magician. They're going to wave the magic wand and everything's going to be wonderful. And a lot of your listeners may have had that thrust on them. I am the Christmas magician. I have to make everything work. And it can be strange, when Grandma dies, and she was the one that knew sizes, colors, and brands.
Oh, right.
Granddad has no earthly idea what they want, and he's just like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And, one man told me, a widower, sobbing, I said, well, can you tell me what exactly is wrong? He said, yes. My wife did all the inside decorations and I did the outside, but she made the inside of our house look so beautiful. And I cannot remember ever telling her how much I appreciated that and how much I loved that.
Oh, wow.
He said, I just wish I had a memory all those years of sometimes saying, darling, you just made everything look so special. And now it may have been that he had, and in his grief, he just could not remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we need somebody else to jog our memories and say, well, don't you remember the year? Because those kind of questions get us going and open us to conversation. And sometimes we need just someone to kind of, I call it reboot the memory or bring the memory into focus. It could be the year the turkey pan, someone dropped the turkey pan and the turkey skidded across the kitchen floor. So you ordered Kentucky Fried Chicken. And everybody kept going, I thought we were having turkey. Well, we're having Kentucky Fried Chicken. And, it's small things that sometimes, my mother, for example, every year, I knew she was going to say, honey, I wish you had kept your money for something you wanted or needed. And I never could break through to her, mother. This was my decision. I wanted you to have it. And then my sister took up that line. You should have kept your money. And I go, is this because you're now like Mama Junior or because you really believe that? And it's families, we bring all these expectations. In my family, there used to be this quote, do you expect me to be a mind reader? And it got very confusing, particularly during the holidays. I worked with a lot of what are called Jerry Springer families.
Uh-huh.
I know you don't have those in the Bay Area. I don't know where your program is heard. But I like to say there are two types of families, those who have been on Jerry Springer and those who haven't been on yet. And something about the holidays, who's not talking to each other? I remember one year, the last year our family was together, there were some in the kitchen who would not come into the living room. Bring my presents out here. I'll open them out here. And you go, can't we just set aside that? And sometimes you go, what's the beef? Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't? I don't know what they're upset about, something that's happened. And then you have people who, well, let's be on our best behavior. This could be Dad's last Christmas, so everybody be on best behavior. Everybody's kind of walking around, and, it takes a lot of energy to pretend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just need to say, wow, this is a tough Christmas or Hanukkah. And I'm stunned by a number of families where the New Year's is really organized around bowl games, and the TV is on from early in the morning till late at night. And you always need to confine people. They're either in the bathroom or they're in front of the TV watching a ball game. And so then when you suddenly go, well, what are we going to do for New Year's? And the other thing is that what we're doing this year, there are anniversaries or there are weddings. So we in my family are having a wedding the 27th of December. And I've kind of said to myself, well, I know I got invited. I wonder who else got invited. So I think there could be a little surprise at the wedding. And where's so-and-so? Well, they weren't invited. And you can't always predict families. You cannot predict what they're going to do.
Our Nobody Told Me conversation continues in just a moment. Much like our extraordinary guests on Nobody Told Me, many Air Medcare Network members have their own inspiring stories to share.
They never thought the unthinkable would actually happen to them, But when it did, they were relieved to have their Air Medcare Network, AMCN, membership.
If a medical emergency arises, Air Medcare Network provides members with world-class air transport services to the nearest appropriate hospital with no out-of-pocket expenses.
More and more, insurance fails to cover the full cost of a medical emergency. Secure protection and financial peace of mind for your entire household by joining Air Medcare Network today. Memberships cost as low as $65 a year and cover 38 states.
Plus, right now, as a Nobody Told Me listener, you'll get a $10 Visa gift card with a new one-year membership.
Visit airmedcarenetwork.com/nobody and use offer code NOBODY.
Again, for a $10 Visa gift card with a new one-year membership, just visit airmedcarenetwork.com/nobody and use offer code NOBODY.
I'm wondering what advice you have for people who are maybe feeling envious during the holidays of others who have that parent or grandparent or sibling or other relative while you're grieving the loss of yours.
Well, that's an excellent question. One of the losses we don't talk about is the people who expected a first baby at Christmas, or they were, going to announce we're pregnant. Mm-hmm. And that loss, and how do you respond to individuals by saying, whatever the loss is, it's a real loss? I would suspect some of your listeners either have lost a job or lost a colleague, or there are rumors about what's going to happen next year financially. And so it's being cognizant of all these types of losses. Sometimes we call them secondary losses, because they're not an actual person. It's not a person that's died, but it's a tradition that's died. There are also a very amazing loss is people who got married this year who have to decide which set of in-laws are we going to this year. Mm-hmm. And that means somebody's going to have, the bride and groom recently married are going to be there. But it means somewhere else, someone is really absent. The other thing with older adults, I encourage people, say it now. Say it now. Tomorrow, I'm ordering a poinsettia for my 96-year-old aunt. She just knows that I love her and love her dearly, and that she can count on that poinsettia coming up to her door. The florist laughs that she always says, I know who this is from. Well, you haven't seen the card yet. I know who this is from. And, she's asked me, why am I still here? And I've just said, the good Lord is not through with you yet. And she's the most amazing woman. At 96, she still goes to the nursing home to sing because those old people need help.
Oh, that's sweet.
I just kind of go, and Ellen, you're 96. But that's her philosophy of life. And she's not had an easy life. But she made a decision. I wish my oldest son were here. He died. Wish my husband were here. He died. But here's who I have left. And this is how I make these holidays special. She doesn't cook anymore, doesn't do the baking and that sort of thing like she once did. But nevertheless, it's a time of gathering. And that poinsettia will be there. And I'm sure she will call and say, I got your poinsettia. And, I don't have a feeling that there's anything left unsaid between us. Mm-hmm. I do wonder how she got all the happiness genes in the family. She got them all. And the rest of us just got, not much left, that crumbs.
Why has it been in your experience that some people are better at handling grief than others?
I think two things. I'm a huge believer in children being involved in grief rituals. For example, last Monday night, this very time last week, I was speaking for a large funeral home's memorial service. And I always invite people, bring your children. Well, I don't think that's appropriate for children. And this choral group sang this wonderful song. And nobody knew whether to applaud or not, but out of the back came this little girl's voice, yay! And everybody broke into laughter, Uh-huh. Uh, and then afterwards, I met the little girl, and I just said, I am so glad you came. And I said to the parent and the grandmother, I'm so glad you brought her. We have those experiences, and for some families, they have shielded children. So there are no real antecedents in their memory or experience. There's a wonderful Catholic church in Kansas City where I formerly lived that always reserved the back row, the back pew in their church for strangers. And they invited parish families, bring your children to a stranger's funeral so they can see what's going to happen. So when one of their family die, this is not all a surprise. The other thing is that, we are become so buck up, suck up, be strong, just be really strong. And we're afraid of losing control. I so often in the groups I ran for 18 years in a hospital in Kansas City, I'd have a person start crying. They said, I'm sorry. And I go, excuse me, tell me what you're sorry for. You're sorry for being human. I said, I don't you think you need to be sorry for that. Tears are the way we punctuate grief, just like a period or an exclamation or a question mark. And what we need are people to give us permission to grieve, who just really say, it's the holidays. These must be very tough for you, and really care. We often use that, how are you doing? And one of my friends that lost a 17-year-old son told me, he said, you can set the clock. That phrase, how are you doing, is going to change to a compliment. Oh, you're doing so well. And then they disappear. And this is a time for listeners who are not personally in grief to think about, well, who do I know that might be in grief? I had friends over these years tell me, well, my husband addressed the cards and I signed the name and wrote a little message inside. And I just can't face sending cards. And I said, well, the Hallmark police are probably not going to find you. You do not have to do that, especially when it had such meaning. And then some people go, well, I don't know who some of these people are. They were from my wife's work. So I really don't know some of these people. And the other tragedy is, we're now so scattered in this country. Somebody may get a card back with deceased written on the envelope. And I had that happen, and it just that had never happened to me before. And I went, well, how come I don't know about this? Why didn't I know about that? And there are people who are so afraid of saying the wrong thing, they say nothing. And I really wish they would not do that. And I've taught some of my grievers to turn it back on them and say, when we do these phrases, they're in a better place. You wouldn't want them back. They're out of their suffering. Just to take a moment and say, can I tell you how that sounds to me? And they may never have had any inclination of what those words sound like. And sometimes the greatest gift is just silence. Sitting there, sharing a coffee in Starbucks, no great conversation, but being present to that individual. I think it's also important to say the name. People get the idea if I say the name, that's going to make them feel sad. And my experience in all these years in this work is not hearing the name is what makes them feel sad. I'll tell you something I believe, and some of your listeners will go, did I hear him right? I'm not afraid of death. I've nearly done it twice with my heart, so I'm not really afraid of it. I'm not really particularly afraid of dying. I just hope I won't die alone. But I am afraid of being forgotten, that my name will stop. And I think that's becoming the great fear in our country. I will be forgotten. And that promise to people, I will say your name. I will remember your name. And I think that's so critical to say in the midst of a holiday, we will find a time to name those And this was very true in the Kennedy extended family. They named the names. The Roosevelts did the same thing on New Year's Eve. They paused just before midnight and made a toast to all those we have loved who are not with us this night. And, it's borrowing from those things that become very important. One of my areas of research is presidential grief in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell a quick little story. Harry Truman was our 33rd president. Next April 12th will be the 75th anniversary of him becoming president following FDR's death. And Harry Truman was a mama's boy. I mean, he was Martha Truman's son. And in 1947, she died. Well, Christmas is coming, and Harry Truman knows one thing for sure. He cannot go home to Independence, Missouri, and Mama Truman not be there. He cannot pretend any of that. Mm. And so he decides to stay in Washington. And the benefit of that was all the Secret Servicemen got to be with their families. The reporters got to be with their families. But he invited all the Trumans in Missouri to come spend Christmas in the White House. Now, he had to work at his emotion. But on midnight on Christmas Day, he took out his diary and he wrote these words, which I hope some of your listeners will lean into. It was a pretty good Christmas, all things considered. It wasn't the greatest Christmas, but it was a pretty good Christmas, all things considered. And actually on Christmas Day, Harry Truman, the president, went to Bethesda Naval Hospital to spend time with wounded soldiers. And not just, hi, how are you? Good to see you. But to spend time with them. And for some of them, that was the most amazing gift of their lives. The president came and sat down next to my bed and talked to me as if we were friends. So, yes, it was a tough Christmas for him, but it was a pretty good Christmas, all things considered. And quite frankly, some years, that's all we can hope for.
And one of the things you advise in your book about a Decembered grief is to write a year-end letter to your deceased loved one. What's the purpose of that, and what should go into that?
Well, our culture has lost so much of letter writing. We send emails, we send texts, that sort of thing. And the letter writing is a chance to sit down with your fingers holding a pen, coordinating with your brain. And it's a chance to put in writing some thoughts that maybe you can't get the words around initially. But it takes just a couple of moments. And I tell people, if you jumpstart, just dive into it, it will show up and catch up with you. And one of the things I urge people is in that letter to offer gratitude. I found this quote. This is new to me, but maybe not to some of your audience. It's by Evans Vallet. How lucky I am to have known somebody that saying goodbye to is so hard. How fortunate I am that I love someone that makes saying goodbye so extremely difficult. And sometimes we just need to offer those gratitudes. A colleague of mine is a big believer in grievers offering 3 gratitudes every day before they go to bed. Because, and Irving Berlin wrote about this at the height of World War II. And I fall asleep counting my blessings. If you're worried you can't sleep, just count your blessings instead of sheep. And sometimes we need to say, I was blessed that I had a father and mother who brought me into this world, who made sure that I got a college education, who sacrificed so the first child in the family to ever go to college could go to college. And expressing those gratitudes becomes so very important. It may be even a thing like, I'll never forget the Christmas gift you gave me that took my breath away. And sometimes our brains it's like priming the pump, taking that pen and just writing. writing those words out. Sometimes I tell people to put them in an envelope, put your address on it, and mail it back to you. Some people are afraid, well, what if somebody sees this? Well, that might be possible, but it also might give them an example. You know, when I have a loss, I'm going to write a Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve letter to my loved one. I do not believe they're, quote, gone. I dislike that word enormously. And I think they're still here. They're still with us. And there come those incredible moments sometimes during the holidays when, it's like the curtains get pulled back just a wee bit and they're there. Mm-hmm. There's some aspect. It could be something. It could be a recipe. It could be the good silver. It could be, something. Or hearing a laugh going, you laugh just like Dad. Do you know you laugh like Dad? Well, nobody's ever told me that. And those importance, I like to say a person's not gone. So two things happen. One, you stop saying the name. And number two, you stop telling stories about them. That's when a person literally is gone, but not until then.
And Harold, on our show, we always ask our guests, what is your nobody told me lesson? And you must just be filled with these. We've already heard so much great advice from you. But what is it that you wish someone had told you about grieving around the holidays when you first started studying grief that you wish they had?
Yeah. What I learned is each death is separate. For example, when my dad died, then we were into the Christmas season. Oh, my Lord, what are we going to do? Because he always played dressed up as Santa Claus. Everybody knew it was Papal, but yet we all played along. And then when my mother died, I thought, oh, I've lost a parent, so this is going to be a rerun of Dad's death. Mm-hmm. And boy, it wasn't. And then when my sister, who's 12 years older than me, when she died, I thought this is going to be a rerun of Mom's death. And I went to her room in the hospital at Christmas, and, they said she won't hear you. And I go, well, I don't believe that. And my sister loved Christmas music. So I decided to bend over her and sing in her ear. Santa Claus is coming to town. Grandma got hit by a reindeer. And, people were like, she doesn't hear you. She doesn't know what you're saying. And I'm like, how do you know? Mm-hmm. And at least I tried in those moments to see her so unlike her. I wish somebody had told me, go ahead and sing. And if it bothers somebody else, that's somebody else. One other thing I would say that I've learned is I tell people to look at their thumbs, and they're like, why do you want us to look at your thumb? And I said, well, get a good look at it. Yeah. Do you know there's 7.5 billion people on planet Earth? Okay. And the FBI says no one's thumbprint is like yours. And they go, and? I said, well, if your thumbprint is unique, your grief print will be unique. Mm-hmm. And anytime somebody tells you you're not grieving correctly or they're in a better place, just twist your thumb where you can see it and wiggle it. If your thumbprint is unique, and it is, your grief print will be unique, especially during the holidays.
I can't imagine that we laughed as much as we did when we're talking about grief.
You make it seem like it's
a
normal.
Part of life. Yeah, which it is. It is normal.
Yeah.
I've learned from thousands of people, the gift to me was they're saying, so you don't think I'm crazy or losing my mind? No, I don't think you're losing your mind. And normal covers a lot of things, especially during the holidays.
Well, Harold, we thank you so much for your wisdom.
Thank you.
Our guest has been grief crisis consultant Harold Ivan Smith. Again, he's written many books on grief, great books on grief, including A Decembered Grief, Living with Loss While Others Are Celebrating. And his website, HaroldIvanSmith.com. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
You're listening to Nobody Told Me. Thank you so much for joining us.